I will go ahead and share my screen. Here we go. All right. And let me move this. Okay. Um, and I'm assuming everyone can hear me okay. Let me know if not. And because we have so much time, this is normally about a 50-minute presentation, but if I'm on a slide and someone has a question, Miriam, if you or someone can just speak up and let me know because I can't see the chat, of course, while I'm sharing. Okay, so let me go ahead then.
Yeah,
Um,
people can just pop in and ask questions if you need to. You can unmute yourself and pop in if you want to know more, okay?
Perfect. Okay, this is what I'm going to be discussing. I assume that most of you already know a fair bit about the climate crisis, but I'll go through some of the basics and then discuss the area of learning principles and how they apply, and then end with a variety of examples. And we can take questions again along the way. Okay, so this from NOAA covers October of last year. You can see that a lot of areas of the globe in October had record warm temperatures. Each year lately, we've been setting records. Yeah, temperatures are going up, and there's no confusion about why. We've actually known for decades it's human-caused global warming. Whenever I do tabling or presentations, I like to share this graph from NASA. This is from ice core data. In some cases, these data are replicated across different ice cores for atmospheric carbon dioxide levels. This is almost a million years. It's just incredible. And you can see there are indeed natural cycles of atmospheric CO2. And you can equally well see that where we are now is not one of them. I still hear this sometimes when I do tabling, oh, it's a natural cycle. No, this is human caused. There's a lot more evidence, which I won't go into. Indicators of global warming are everywhere. This is just a small sample. And here's some additional examples. All these heat waves we're getting around the world, even in places like Siberia, Canada, the awful fires in many places, record high temperatures, flooding. I worked at Florida International University 5 years in the beginning of this millennium, and we did not get sunny day flooding then. This is downtown Miami, and there is no storm anywhere near. Instead, the flooding is due to global warming mainly. And Miami at least has the resources to pay for this. Bangladesh doesn't. Bangladesh is a developing country, not many resources, very low lying, and very susceptible to inundation by sea level rise from climate change. Villages are having to move, farmers are losing their farms. Who will help them? I can add, I served in the
Susan,
Peace
are you
Corps.
saying the flooding is not just the monsoon season?
Right. I'm saying that there's also flooding. It's worse because of sea level rise, right?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, right. And a number of other places around the world too are seeing flooding due to sea level rise now because global warming has gotten to that stage, right? I could give more examples if you like, right? Yeah. So yeah, when I served in the Peace Corps in the 1980s, I was in the South Pacific, and those are developing nations to a real climate justice issue here because they're losing their coral reefs because of the temperatures in the ocean getting to record levels, right? 100 degrees last year off of the Keys in Florida. That was a record, yeah. And that's a big part of their economy as well as really important for biodiversity. So this is the most recent detailed report from the main body of scientists worldwide that's been tracking climate change and making recommendations. That's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And here's a graph from that report. And this is global CO2 emissions beginning in the year 2000, still going up. This is around where we are now. We're hoping that 2024 or this year will prove to be the high point and that we will start to decline. We really need to because we're at roughly around 1.3 degrees centigrade warming compared to pre-industrial now. And in order to keep that to about 1.5 degrees, we got to try and get on this blue line track. And you can see that's a pretty steep cut. Um, this gray bar here, this is 2030. Uh, 2015 is when we got the Paris Agreement, and nearly all nations in the globe, including the United States, signed on to that. I think there were only three exceptions. And if all those nations meet what they said they would do, then we get to the bottom of the gray bar there. And of course, the US has pulled out under the current administration, and that only gets us to the 2-degree warming line. And we do not want to go to 2 degrees. It's bad enough now at 1.3, isn't it? So this corresponds, compared to 2019, to a 43% cut in about 5 years. That's a big challenge. And unfortunately, pretty much everything humans do has a carbon footprint. In the US, this pie chart looks different, and the biggest segment is transportation at about a quarter. I will be giving examples from most of these sectors, with the exception of agriculture. I will be giving some food services examples, though. So, the proper comparison across nations for where the greenhouse gas emissions are coming from is on a per capita basis and including not only CO2, but things like methane, which is also a powerful greenhouse gas. Now, the United States is not the worst. Some of the Middle Eastern countries are. They are still in the 20s. However, we are near the top, along with Canada and Australia, who are at about the US level. Good news is that the US is down from being in the 20s, like some of the Middle Eastern countries are now, only about 10 to 15 years ago. So we're making progress. More good news is that some states like California and Massachusetts are already at the level of Japan and the European Union. And the UK and Germany are at around 8. In between Japan and the EU, and they're showing that we can have democracy, capitalism, good jobs, good quality of life, and still meet our obligation to cut the greenhouse gas pollution. Michigan is at about the national average. So it could be worse, could be better. Developing nations are below India. Most of them are at the 0 to 1 level. And that's, we all need to be at around India's level by around 2045 to 2050, according to the scientific consensus. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, and I'm hoping most of you already knew much of this. All right, then. This is very costly, not only in terms of human life and many other harmful effects, but in terms of financial implications, because this graph is controlling for inflation. This is just in the US, looking at the number of billion-dollar disasters. So, other things being equal, these bars should be at the same level for the number of billion-dollar disasters. Instead, mainly due to climate change, we're seeing this huge increase. It looks like 2024, those data are not out yet, will be, I think, on a level of 2023, and just costly in many, many ways, including insurance companies no longer insuring people in parts of California, Louisiana, and Florida, because there's been too many climate change fueled disasters like hurricanes and floods and fires. And tragically, what's also happened is that the big insurance companies, a number of them, even as they are pulling out of and doing insurance because of climate change, they're continuing to insure fossil fuel development that's causing climate change because they can make money. And this hurts low-income people. It's a real climate justice issue because if you're owning your home on the coast of Louisiana, but you don't have a lot of resources, all you've got available now is the state insurance program, which is more expensive. And if you can't afford it, and then there's a disaster, and you lose your home, you don't have any insurance. Yeah, it's a huge, huge problem. And of course, not just in the US. Okay, there are lots of resources covering every aspect of climate change, including ways to address it. I'm just going to give you a few examples. For many years, I have maintained an annotated list of about 50 to 60 of my favorites over the last 10 years. I've been following climate change since the late 1980s, so I've read hundreds of books at this point. Um, these two really valuable. I think anyone who thinks that 2 degrees centigrade is not too bad needs to read this book. Very evidence-based. He goes over what a world would look like at 2 degrees warming, 3 degrees warming, etc. And on the right, Greta Thunberg, as you probably know, is the young Swedish woman who started a movement, the climate strike on behalf of students to get more climate action. She did not write this book. She and others edited it, though, and they recruited leaders in every aspect of climate change, including climate action, to write very short chapters summarizing their areas. It's a long, rather dense book, but really valuable. There is good news as well as bad news. It's well worth a read. Both of these books are more hopeful, and we really, really need hope, folks. These are dark times in so many ways. Uh, Drawdown was a big bestseller in 2017. It covers 80 current and 20 near-term methods of bringing down greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. Has nice color pictures and human interest stories, great examples from around the world, very useful appendix with, the fine details, also a website, also the Drawdown Project, which is actually carrying out projects around the world. Very hopeful, even while, of course, they get the urgency. And on the right, the book that we made available at the Climate Action Coalition in the Central Valley of California that I co-founded and co-chaired when we did outreach. Um, Mary DeMacher just did a brilliant job writing a funny book about climate change. You wouldn't think that would be possible, would you? How can it be funny? But she finds the humor, she's inspiring, she's very thorough and suggesting ways that we can all work on this. Whether you're a parent or not, this is a wonderful book, an easy read that is hopeful, inspiring, and motivating, and again, great examples. Just very highly recommended. Get it for everyone you know. And in terms of e-newsletters covering climate change, both of these include a lot of behavior, a lot of good news, as well as a lot of bad news. So these are my top two choices. There's a number of others out there. Maybe some of you already subscribe. I hope so. And now to the second part. Let me pause briefly again in case there's any questions so far.
I am
Okay.
not seeing any.
Okay. Thank you, Miriam. Going on then. Okay, good news. Back in the 1970s, I studied solar engineering. I have two engineering degrees. My bachelor's is from Illinois Tech. And the basic science behind solar panels has not changed in all those many, many years. We've had the knowledge and technology needed to address the climate crisis successfully for some time. And economists are really in strong agreement that there's huge financial savings as well as saving human lives in doing so. I'm not going to go into the obstacles. I'm sure most of you know a lot of them. The upshot here is that this is a behavioral problem. That's where behavioral science comes in. Policy is the biggest mover of climate action, and it's how the European Union and California have been so successful in getting their per capita greenhouse gas emissions down. I am not going to talk about this today. I am going to note that I have a number of recommended policy books in my annotated list, which is freely available to all. What I'm going to focus on instead is the kind of things that you folks are already doing, kudos to you, and that's more local action, community level action, person by person, but beyond that, ideally, so you have more impact, your local schools, your local businesses, etc. So organizations where you can affect whole groups of people and get them on board with the sustainability actions that we need to take. And examples of these actions, and these are just examples. This is an obvious one. This one, of course, and I hope most of you know that gas stoves not only put out climate pollution, but really bad indoor air pollution. Even when they're turned off, a number of models are, really putting out health-harming air pollution. And so that in itself is a good reason to switch to one of these modern induction cooktop stoves or other forms of electric stove. Leaf blowers and mowers that rely on fossil fuels, these motors are extremely inefficient. Extremely inefficient. They put out a lot of air pollution, including a lot of climate pollution. The electric alternatives are much to be preferred, or, rakes, or even better, what I've been doing for 20 years now, putting in natives, getting rid of lawn, or at least minimizing lawn, and natives have the advantage of helping with the biodiversity crisis. This is a picture of my mainly native plant lawn in the Central Valley of California, actually Stockton, where I lived for 12 years before I moved here about 3.5 years ago. And you get your bees, your butterflies, your plants, your beneficial insects, and you don't have to mow. Yay! They're not always low impact, I've got to say, but they can be if you do it right. Okay, here's something we're doing at Western. Also, thanks to my colleague in the psychology department at Western, Kate Martini, at the Arcadia Center, downtown Kalamazoo. Food waste, in this country and in most places around the world, about a third of food gets wasted somewhere along the way from, field to fork. And so we really need to do better with that. And a lot of that goes into methane, a powerful greenhouse gas. So either using it and not wasting it or composting it correctly. And that can really help. That is really fairly significant. Transportation, again, the biggest sector for the US. I bought a used electric vehicle nearly 5 years ago. I have a Chevy Bolt, which I love. And I've been a commuter cyclist for most of my life, wherever that was possible. E-bikes are a really great solution for people who are having trouble with like the hills in Kalamazoo. Oh boy, my knees are still handling it when I bike around town. I can bike to campus, but I can see somewhere in the not too far future, I am going to be getting an electric motor add-on for my hybrid, and yeah, anything we can do in that regard helps. For many years, I only fly for my climate work. Flying, unfortunately, has a big carbon footprint. Uh, some of you already know because we talked about it in the beginning. Yeah, fast fashion, big carbon footprint, not a good idea. You may not know that bottled water also has quite a significant carbon footprint. In addition, it often has poorer water quality than tap water, according to a number of studies. A recent one that I saw found that a lot of bottled water has very high levels of microplastics, which are not good, and tap water has very low levels. So those are just some examples. There's many more, of course, because that's one of the challenges here, that this is not something with, just a couple of solutions. It's something that requires all kinds of changes, and that's hard. Okay, so it would be great if we could just give everyone information and then they would do, and all the organizations would do the things that need to be done. Unfortunately, we all know information alone is seldom enough. So, what are the barriers to these kinds of changes? One is habits. I mean, we're all used to relying on fossil fuels for so much. They've been great. They've explained a lot of the development in the developed nations, and that's hard to change. Similarly, with changing your diet, changing your transportation habits. But psychologists and other behavioral scientists have ways to help with that. And another big barrier, according to the American Psychological Association Task Force, is a sense of futility. I see this when I do tabling and talks. People feel like it's hopeless. It's not hopeless, folks. We are making progress worldwide and in this country, and the more that we keep it closer to 1.5, even if we go over a bit, the better. There's real consequences just to limiting it to 1.6 degrees instead of 1.7. And there's all kinds of successes. I gave a talk at Western recently on international climate successes because, we need to know the gloom and doom stuff too, no question about that. But we can't just have gloom and doom. We have to have reason for hope. And again, psychology can help with that. So, we need new green habits, new social norms, and this is a book put out by a nonprofit I worked for several years in sustainability called Root Solutions, and I co-authored two of the chapters. It's over 500 pages, so not really for the general public. It's intended for practitioners in sustainability, but this is interdisciplinary, all kinds of areas of the behavioral social sciences, some of the natural sciences are in here, and a really valuable resource for anyone who goes into this area and just good to know about. And I was the token behavior analyst. This is an area of psychology that focuses on basic learning principles, which are as much a part of biology as psychology. And not going to go into this in detail. I myself worked on mathematical modeling of behavior and nature-nurture relations and was a faculty member. And I ended up writing a book about this area for the public called Science of Consequences, hence the name of my website. And it includes sustainability. And anyone who wants to know more, it's in the local libraries. And uh, hopefully you would enjoy it. It won an award. It made it into one of the top two science journals in the world. And I did a 3-year international book tour. Yeah, it was really kind of nice, kind of good. And after that, that's when I started working full time on sustainability since 2016 now. So today I'm just going to cover a few of the basic learning principles, things like positive reinforcement. There's a lot more to it than that, believe me, but just let's look first at some of these dimensions because consequences are there for almost everything we do. Multiple consequences, sometimes short term, long term, etc. Intrinsic, meaning things like when you ride your bike to work, you get that endorphin rush. That's an intrinsic reward. And someone might compliment you, a social reward, social recognition, for doing that. And that's extrinsic, anything from outside you. And there's just a huge range of these things. Because what people often think of first when they think about incentivizing the move towards sustainability, they think right away of financial incentives. And they do often work, and these rebates in legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act, very successful. But there's a lot more we have to work with that's a lot less costly. And this example is one that I really like because a few years ago, Vermont, like everywhere else, is getting more heat waves than they used to. So one of the main utilities there was having to jack up their charge because they were having to go outside their supply network so that people in Vermont could use a lot of air conditioning during a heat wave. So they tried time of use pricing, which meant that they charged more in the afternoon and early evenings to use electricity. And this often works. It's just a minor financial incentive. You save some money by not turning the air conditioning on quite as strongly. And in this case, it didn't work. Vermonters were willing to pay a bit more to be comfortable. So the utility tried something novel. They tried what we call a group consequence. And remember, Vermont's a relatively small state. But They told all of their customers that if, as a group, they could keep their electrical demand during the next heat wave below a certain peak level, that the utility would donate $1,000 to a local animal shelter. Brilliant. And they uh, disseminated this, and people thought this was cool. They talked about it. The utility provided feedback so that people would know, okay, how close are we to the peak level? And this worked. This was cheaper all around. For the next heat wave, the charity was a domestic violence shelter, and that worked too. Obviously, the charity has to be non-controversial, but this kind of thing really gives you hope for human nature. And again, shows the idea that you got all kinds of incentives that can be very effective. This is another tool in the sustainability project toolbox that is ubiquitous, and that's feedback, which has multiple behavioral aspects to it. Multiple learning principles are involved. You've got the consequence factor there, and you've got signals of various kinds, information. This is a, uh, 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 this is an early Prius dashboard, very early. I'm sure it looks different now. That, of course, being a hybrid vehicle. And for the first time, ordinary drivers had access to their fuel economy in real time, the miles per gallon there on the right. My dad used to calculate this by hand, and when you go fill up at the pump, most people don't do that, and it's delayed. Immediate consequences are a lot more effective than delayed consequences. We've quantified that. There's a mathematical relation that people in my field found. So not surprisingly, this was so effective that some people started driving in really efficient ways and started competing against each other, forming groups called hypermilers. They have a kind of convention each year, at least before COVID they did, and they would compete against each other on a track to see what amazingly high levels they would achieve in their particular model of hybrid. And just ordinary people were affected by this, right? They could see if they accelerated too quickly from a stoplight, their miles per gallon would go down, whereas if they accelerated slowly, it would be higher, right? The hypermilers even sometimes did things like draft on semis on the freeway, which is kind of dangerous and not advisable, and failed to stop at a stop sign all the way when they were, trying to increase their fuel economy because that reduces it, and not good, not good. But that was because this was so reinforcing. And at the last Hybrid Fest before COVID, I found a report about the levels of fuel economy that were achieved by one winner. And I normally ask people to guess at this stage. I don't know if this will work with the Zoom format, but we can try. Anyone want to guess what level of miles per gallon that the winner achieved in a Prius?
Come on, people, unmute and make your guess.
Well, the chart has somebody at 100.
107 miles.
Oh, yeah, those are,
I
yeah.
say 80.
Well, folks, the one who was highest was closest, and those are really good guesses.
Oh my gosh.
Yep, yep. It is amazing what is possible there. And of course, there's a battery and a fuel tank.
How did they do that? you know,
It's amazing. You go on their website and find out. But yeah, this is really showing the power of immediate reinforcement there, and the social reinforcement, of course, from the competition. Okay, here's another example of a learning principle that some of you may already know. Schedules of reinforcement, it's often covered in introductory psychology classes, as indeed it should be. When you have a reward, sometimes like a beautiful view out a window, every time you turn your head to look at the view, you get the reward, right? It's a one-to-one relationship. But most relationships between a behavior and its consequences are a heck of a lot more complex than that. For example, you don't get the reward every time. It's more like fishing. It's an intermittent or variable schedule of reinforcement, and there's a whole big science just behind this, which I'm not going to go into, very well quantified. These things apply across animals as well as people. The basic idea here, though, is that when you're casting to try and catch a fish, you might have to cast, 3 times or maybe 26 times before you get a strike and are rewarded by getting a strike. And the fact is that the very next cast might be rewarded. You just don't know. So variable schedules tend to be highly motivating. In some cases, there's antecedents before the behavior that are an important part of what's going on here too. In this case, if you see a signal like a lot of little fish jumping in a particular area, then that's a signal that you're more likely to be reinforced if you cast your lure in that area because there must be some big fish around, right? And that's been worked into the behavioral models as well. But going back to variable schedules, that's a big part, excuse me, I got to drink some water here, of what makes gambling potentially addictive. Oh boy. Okay. Oh boy. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Boy.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, thank you. All right, so gambling and video games both take full advantage of what we know about variable schedules of reinforcement. Because, like with slot machines or, games of chance, the very next push of the button on the slot machine could be reinforced. So, very highly motivating. This can be used for good as well in the case of sustainability. And this is a great article in this well-established journal showing that things like lotteries and contests that are variable schedules of reinforcement work really well to help get people, going green. And I'm going to share an example with you from the early history of research in my own field with learning principles back in the 1970s. After the first Earth Day, people in my field helped establish the larger field of environmental psychology, and we see research like this. In this case, this is a trucking company with 200 drivers driving these big semis, and the company wanted to reduce their fuel use, thereby saving on pollution. Also, of course, on the climate impact, but this is the 70s before we knew about all that. So this is a y-axis where we're looking at the fuel economy, and the baseline level is 4.8 miles per gallon. These things are terrible. These semis are really highly polluting and inefficient. Even to this day, they only get 6 to 7 miles per gallon, according to the research that I did online. So, in this first phase, the company gave a training session to all their drivers on how to drive more efficiently and use less fuel. And you could see that worked at first. The efficiency went up from 4.8 to about 5.1, and then it stopped working. They also got approval from their boss when they succeeded in raising their efficiency. So that was the main incentive. They added extra recognition here, and that helped. Then they reversed back to the baseline level, and the level went down. And then they did what really worked. They added a weekly lottery so that if you improved your fuel efficiency or maintained it at a high enough level, you could enter the lottery and win a prize once a week. And this works so well that they were able to thin that out to biweekly and then to monthly, and then presumably they were able, after the study ended, to stop using the prizes and the lottery at all because the truckers had transitioned to a new habit, which is what we want to do with sustainability, right? And you can see how a variable schedule of reinforcement would lend itself to that because you don't always get the reward for every behavior. So you get used to doing without it as you transition to driving more efficiently. So this really worked. And what gets me about this study every time is that the prizes for winning were not big things like dinner at a fancy restaurant. No, they were things, and I kid you not, and this was the 1970s, things like a pen set with the company logo. Yeah, just incredible. It doesn't take much, and it illustrates the power of variable schedules. Okay, so we often have delays until you get the desired behavior established. And again, what else can you do to help establish new habits? How do you bridge the delays? Social support, really powerful incentive for almost all of us. Shaping. This is differential reinforcement of successive approximations to the target that you're aiming for. Kind of like that, cold, getting warm, getting hot game that a lot of us played when we were kids, where you try and meet people where they're at. So, for example, this is tofu. I eat tofu. I have some friends who are environmentalists who've never even tried it. They don't like the idea. If you're trying to get someone to go more plant-based, like, meatless Mondays, stuff like that, or try an Impossible Burger or a veggie burger, well, you can't expect people to switch to become vegan overnight, right? If they were eating a lot of meat before. So you have to show a lot of appreciation when they just try tofu or try a Beyond Burger or try, bicycling to work for the first time or carpooling for the first time. And then you go from there. You gradually shape them into moving towards, doing more plant-based meals, carpooling more often, etc. Okay, new social norms. When everyone else is putting out their recycling bin, that means that's a signal to people. Okay, this is what people do. I should start recycling too, etc. People, amazingly, often live up to pledges that they make. When there's like a drive to get people to commit, to switch away, from using gas-powered lawn equipment or something like that. When people make a commitment, especially when other people know about it, they often find it reinforcing to live up to that. So that can be a very effective method. Again, there's all kinds of methods in behavioral science. And as you can imagine, when you see you're making progress, this works for dieting. It's very rewarding. This works for sustainability too. And a lot of apps take advantage of that. So these are some of the tools we have. So let me share some resources and examples then. I serve on the Landmark Designation Committee for Climate Change for this freely available website. That's a pro bono thing I do. This is just wonderful. It goes back to the end of the last millennium, does public health as well as environmental projects like sustainability, and has all these examples, full experiments, case studies, all data-based, with everything you need to replicate a community level project. All the data, all the resources that you need, people you can contact, all the methods, everything. I think it's just brilliant myself. And it includes a planning guide, and there's even a project on reducing flying, something that has not been addressed very much. And this is a great example on a large scale, but you can see how you can use it on a smaller scale to get people to drive less and use alternatives more. And all kinds of great behavior principles in here, including learning principles. First of all, you want to identify the barriers, why people aren't already doing these things, and then address them. And they did that at public meetings where they had role models for people who were carpooling and biking, etc., and how they made that work and how they addressed the barriers. They timed this for neighborhoods when there was road construction. So people were already having to change their old habits, so they were more willing to try riding public transit for the first time. Uh, they made it easy by providing a free transit card, so there was no expense, like for a month. And Seattle has rapid transit as well as buses. They got people to sign pledges. They used shaping methods, so when people did try carpooling for the first time, they were able to support that. And they had a huge drop. I mean, imagine in Chicago or any big city, if you have a 20% drop at solo car trips during rush hour, yeah. And they did establish new habits. So I think that's a great illustration. Here's something we could do in local schools, and again, details are all in this case study on the tools of change there. I'm happy to share this with anyone who has any connection with one of our local schools, because the whole school district in this case earned an Energy Star. Over the years, they had teams of faculty, staff, and students working together to try and cut the energy use of the schools. They took advantage of school rivalries. This could work not just for sports, but for sustainability. They had immediate reinforcement built in wherever possible when someone turned off a light or a computer or something like that. And they used public recognition, which is a very inexpensive incentive for cash-strapped schools. And they saved millions of dollars that went into school programs instead of to fossil fuels and their pollution. So really a big success.
When you say on tools of change, does that mean that there's more about it in your book?
Okay, the Tools of Change is a website.
Okay,
So if you go on the website, it is freely available. Yes, you can find this on this case study number 674 there. I've got
okay.
the link there, right? Yes. And all the details are there, and we can bring that here. Yeah, that there's no reason why we can't do this if we get enough people interested in making it happen.
And
I'm
how were they saving money? Were they using less energy? Um,
Exactly. They were
okay.
saving money because they used a lot less energy. 30% savings because of so much less energy, right?
I know Kalamazoo had some program like that because Mary Ann was working with, I think it was the kids at Central. I'm not sure if it was Central or Loy at one point, with one of their teachers. I don't know if he's still there, Josh Shapiro. And they were trying to reduce the use of electricity and energy in their school.
I'm so glad to hear that. I know other
I don't know if it's still going on since I haven't heard Josh's name for a while, but Mary Ann would know more about it.
Yeah, we should ask her then. And hopefully other schools are copying that. And there's networks for schools too. That's one of my last slides in this presentation where they're sharing this as well, right? Yeah, I was really pleased when I moved here to find out about Bronson. I know they had a Fridays for Future presentation, and they have a lot of good programs for saving energy and encouraging their employees to bike and carpool and all that. And so we definitely have a number of good sustainability initiatives right here in Kalamazoo. Yeah, yeah. But we can use more, right? Okay, good. And here's one that I was involved in my last position in the Central Valley of California with that Climate Action Coalition that I co-founded and co-chaired. Because vehicle idling, for those who have internal combustion engine vehicles, is an easy win-win-win here. You don't have to idle more than 10 seconds, except in really, really cold weather, which of course we do sometimes get here in Michigan, but most of the time 10 seconds is enough. Beyond that, it's wasteful. That's according to the manufacturers, the auto manufacturers, as well as independent research. And you have less carbon pollution, you save money for fuel, plus less air pollution, which is bad for health, right? Especially for kids for the drop-off stop places at schools. So this is a win-win-win. And in California, when I was there, this became a project that all of California was encouraging schools to post signs asking people who were dropping off kids not to idle, with the signs you see there at the bottom right over here, right? Yeah. Uh, and in my city, we did an informal survey of schools, all of us in my Climate Action Coalition, and found that a whole bunch of them had the signs, but hadn't posted them, right? So this was one of our projects. You just get them to post the signs. What were the barriers, why they weren't, et cetera. And we did lobbying with regard to idling. And we got, I got a program going. This is another board that I'm on for, it's called Green Driving America now. That's a nonprofit to encourage drivers at schools and elsewhere to stop idling. And it's more than just science in this case. This is a project that's been successful in places like Vermont and California in getting drivers, who are dropping off kids at school, not to have their engine idling if like there's a line, Some of them it's not an issue, but a lot of schools, you do get a lot of idling going on. So you work with students in a science class, like in a middle school level. It can work for elementary and high school as well. I brought it to one of the high schools in Stockton, and you get the students taking data on, how much idling is going on before. And then you have the school announce an idling campaign, and then the students contact the drivers, give them a sticker, get them to sign a pledge not to idle. They've got information about why, you don't need to, and it's causing this damage, with the air pollution. And then you have data collection. So yeah, it's a good science project for the students. And in some schools, you see idling dropping by over 50%. It's usually at least a third drop. Sometimes it's more than 50%. Yeah, it's really pretty significant. And then hopefully those drivers get in the habit of not idling elsewhere, like in drive-throughs, etc. Yeah, so that's something that we could certainly bring to Kalamazoo. Okay, here's one of many projects to get energy conservation measures in place. In this case, this one in Colorado got enrollment rates doubled, and 40% of energy efficiency assessments led actually to upgrades. Sometimes people get these energy audits and then they don't act on them. And so there's more details there. And then this is not a tools of change, although maybe it will be soon. This separate study found that if you have a really vivid, image like this. If you have a very strong signal antecedent, this is going to be a lot more powerful in getting people to follow up on an energy audit than just some kind of handout that you get, like here's how much we think you could save, and do weather stripping here, more insulation in your attic, or etc. I mean, it gets kind of dry, right? It works for some people, doesn't work for others. When people see an image like this, where you can see the heat that you're losing through cracks by your doors and your windows and all that, wow. I mean, 5 times more to do the weather stripping. That's a huge, huge difference there in this environmental psychology journal article. Okay, and then I've got two examples here for food, and then I've got some for gamification. We're starting to wind down here. World Resources Institute is one of the two with the e-newsletters that I recommended. This is a very large, highly regarded nonprofit that's international, works with the UN, and the IPCC, etc. And they have long had this cool food initiative to get small and large food service organizations to try and cut back on their energy use and try and get people to move more towards sustainable diets. So to encourage plant-based, vegetarian, less beef, more chicken. Chicken has a much lower carbon footprint than beef. And I'm going to have a slide on that too coming up. And just the way you write about your plant-based options in your menu has been found in research to make a big difference in the likelihood of people, trying that. And so we actually have this initiative in Kalamazoo because this big conglomerate that runs Panera and some of these other large chain restaurants participates in this. And those of you who've been to one of our local Paneras can testify to this. A lot more details on the webpage here and on uh, uh, the World Resources Institute website, of course. And then this one is good for reducing food waste. For grocery stores, for example, if you have something that's close to its sell-by date, food is still often good after that, and they often end up throwing it away. So this is an alternative app where if you belong to it, then you get information about these things that are available at a reduced price. Malformed veggies and other produce. Yeah, I routinely buy bad looking produce because I know otherwise doesn't Mike get tossed and put methane into the air, right? So I've gotten into that habit, and this is part of this app too. And we have this then locally. And Nikki, was it you who mentioned this, right? At the Fridays for Future?
Myers takes part of it, and there's a grocery store in Battle Creek that uses it also. Yeah.
Yay! And Nikki actually did this for a while, so in the Q&A, she can tell us all about that, like she did at the Fridays for Future, where I was going over tools of change, right? So really nice that this is available, and there's other apps like this that are succeeding in reducing fuel use. So in terms of learning principles, then I've got a lot of other examples in this article that's open source that I published a couple of years ago. More learning principles in this article and more examples. And I'm going to end with a few from gamification, which also definitely uses a whole lot of learning principles like positive reinforcement and schedules. This one uses images, pretty vivid here, of happy chickens. If you save energy, unhappy, really unhappy chickens on the left here. If you're wasting energy, and who wants to see an unhappy chicken, huh? So, in this small business with 42 employees, over just 12 weeks, they saw a 13% decline in energy use. This is significant. Hopefully, they got some new habits going. Hopefully, this generalized to how these people saved energy at home as well and in other organizations. This is one from my own field of behavior analysis that was devised over 25 years ago using cartoon characters as role models with superpowers if they ate their veggies. And they had little stories there, and you got stickers. So there were rewards and support from the teacher, support from your parents if you ate your veggies, shaping, if you tried a vegetable for the very first time. And on the left is the experimental school. This was run over just, I think, it was just a couple of weeks. It was a relatively short period that they were comparing. Before is red, after is after that they did the food dudes thing. And there's other programs like this. Because, kids don't always eat very healthfully, right? This was at school lunches, and the experimental school saw a big increase in fruit and particularly in vegetable consumption at lunches. And the control school, which was otherwise similar, that did not do the Food Dudes program, actually declined. So this was so popular that this was for a while used in all schools in Ireland. I believe it is currently being used in schools in California, other places in the United States and around the world, and programs like it. And this is relevant because we do need to move toward a more plant-based diet, especially beef is an issue. I'm going to show you now a pie chart. And I want you to guess the proportion of the pie chart out of all the weight of all the mammals on the planet that is wild. Okay, so there's three wedges, all the weight of all the mammals. There's a proportion that's wild. There's a proportion that's us, because there's 8 billion people now, so we weigh a fair bit. And then there's our livestock, cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, right? Mainly cattle, though. They're big and there's a lot of them. So think for a bit about what that proportion is. Anyone want to make a guess? What's the proportion of the mammal weight that is wild?
I don't know.
10,000 to 1.
Oh, okay, but it's a percentage. Yeah.
Oh,
So out of 100% is all the mass. A certain percentage is wild, a certain percentage is us, a certain percentage is our livestock.
percent,
30% wild.
Okay.
half a percent wild.
Sorry?
Half a percent wild.
Oh yeah. Okay. You're really gloom and doom, right? It's in.
5%.
Sorry?
5%?
Oh, you got it. You got it.
Ooh,
Absolutely.
okay,
It
whoa.
is, in fact, that is
Very wow.
5%. Yeah, this is, yeah, the first time you see this, I was shocked. This is a part of my climate quiz. I do tabling for the climate change working group at Western and at my climate coalition in California. Yeah, it's just shocking. This is one of two independent assessments both of which found the proportion to be the percentage to be about 5% for wild. Yeah, this is a cattle planet. We got a biodiversity crisis here as well as a climate crisis, and cattle unfortunately put out a lot of methane,
Mhm.
which is a powerful greenhouse gas, as you folks probably already know. Yeah, so we really need to cut back on beef. Dairy is an issue too, although not as bad as beef. Some dairy is really pretty good. Other dairy is really a big problem. Chicken is significantly better than beef. So yeah, so for many years I've been mainly vegan. I do still do sustainable seafood, and again, chicken is pretty good. And yeah, dairy, it's all across the map with the cheeses. Some of you may know more about that than I do, but from what I see, yeah, some cheeses are pretty good. Some cheeses are, yeah, not good. So anyway. And this is has some gamification. So yeah, so that was a gamification example there, right? It's kind of gamified. And this is too, there's some gamification and a lot of apps there for any aspect you can think of for sustainability. This is one we're currently doing at Western. My colleague who spoke in the International Climate panel I organized on campus in March. Tim Palmer, who does sustainable business management in the Business College at Western, is currently running a trial of this app with some of his students. This was very successful at the University of Washington and other places. Some of these conferences I go to, I've heard presentations about this. So that's something else that we could try. You could do this in neighborhoods too. And you know, you get points, you get social support. These things are pretty cleverly done. Okay, next to last slide here. In addition to tools of change, there's all of these networks, you know, any kind of organization you're connected to. Unitarian Universalist churches probably have a network for sustainability things that they can do, right? Yeah, K-12 education. I've worked with some of these. I've worked with Green Ninja, ASHE, that's Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. Most colleges and universities in the US belong to that. Western does, K College does. I've given workshops for them when I worked for that nonprofit. They have, and I follow them. They've got a great discussion board with resources for what's worked on campus, what doesn't work. You get to share ideas. Same thing for these business collaboratives. We have one in Western Michigan, the West Michigan Sustainable Business Forum, which some of you may know more about than I do. I think I saw one presentation by them. And in healthcare too. So there's a lot going on. This is very hopeful. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to take what's already out there and implement it. And all of us can help with that, like you folks are already doing. So last slide then. Thank you for all that you are already doing. I think it's so important just to talk about climate change. People often don't realize, most people in this country get it, that climate change is real and that we do need to take action. And they don't realize that so many people get it. And so just talking about it and sharing good, hopeful news, I think, is a real contribution. Thanks for everything else that you do. And thank you for hosting me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.